You have stumbled upon Behind the Buzz, a Public Fit Theater Company's occasional podcast discussing the plethora of production processes. I'm just testing the pop shields here at APF headquarters. The plethora of production processes that go into the creation of our season of plays and stage readings. Believe it or don't, this is episode 3 of season number 3, and believe it or don't, I'm APF producing director Joe Kucan, and I'm joined, you better believe it, by artistic director Ann-Marie Pereth. Hello.
Hi there.
And today's the day we talk about the second stage reading of our season, Alistair McDowell's Brilliant Adventures. Later on, Ann-Marie and I will be joined by director Jake Staley and child prodigy Ryan Ruckman. And if I seem a little extra irreverent today, I think it has something to do with the nature of Alistair McDowell's work. He's known for his stylistic experimentation and kind of unconventional narrative structure, although I'm not sure that's really the case with Brilliant Adventures, but I have a few people here to tell me if I'm wrong. McDowell is a bit dark and surreal even for you. What did you find so appealing about Brilliant Adventures that you decided to include it in the season?
Anything that has to do with time travel, I'm
spoiler alert! Spoiler alert!
Time travel in a cardboard box is really cool, and the fact that they would believe that a cardboard box is a time travel machine, I found that to be fascinating. Also, there's a character in the play that comes in an unconventional package that is. Leads the audience to believe that he's a genius, and he's the creator of the time travel machine, and he has a bit of a stutter. He is part of a family. We could say that his brother is a drug dealer, and in spite of all that, he tries to do his best to be an ethical person, and I'm really attracted to people in unconventional packages. He also stutters.
Well, it's an unconventional family too. I want to ask Jake and Ryan about this when we bring them in. But there is, in a lot of ways, well, maybe not a lot of ways. In some ways, it's a family drama. It's about a sort of family that has lost itself and is finding itself. There's a really deep family.
Right. You make a lot of assumptions about each of the family members, and the playwright kind of takes those assumptions and turns them on its head by the end of the play, and so I find that to be very appealing.
Right. Well, let's bring the fellas in, and I'm going to introduce them really quick. Jake Staley, our returning champion, received his BFA in theater and dance, emphasis mind, at the University of Wyoming, then moved to Florida to complete his MFA in acting at Florida State University for actor training, where he spent some time abroad, actually studying in London. You probably saw him over in Cockroach in Still Dance the Stars, but you certainly saw him here at a Public Fit in any number of staged readings, but also in Elephant Man, August Osage County, Things I Know to Be True, and most recently he was one of those three with that heavy line load in 3 Days of Rain. As a director, his staging of Brandon Jacobs Jenkins' Glorious started off last year's reading season. Hey, Jake.
Hi.
Thanks for showing up. Was that your real voice?
Yeah, it was my really excited voice, and I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so glad to hear that too. Let me introduce Ryan really quick. Ryan Ruckman is a grad student at UNLV, where he is frequently cast as very, very old men.
Even though he's so young.
That's fair, right? That's fair.
It is.
Okay.
No, it's a fair thing.
You saw him in NCT's productions of The Cherry Orchard and A Midsummer Night's Dream and Ring Around the Moon. He and his lovely wife, Betsy, who you also know, you know her, you loved her in Things I Know to Be True and 3 Days of Rain. The two of them are expecting their first child. We just found out any day now.
Yeah, very soon. Very soon. Very
Ryan,
soon.
thanks for showing up.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So I'm going to start with you, Jake. You're a big fan of Alistair McDowell, just sort of writ large, all of his work in general. What's the appeal? I asked Ann-Marie this question. What's the appeal to you?
I think you kind of hit it on the head when you said unconventional, storylines in terms of how they're presented in terms of the timeline. I really like. To be fair, Brilliant Adventures is fairly straightforward. There is something used to where you go, okay, that breaks the timeline up. But he usually presents things kind of how I've come to associate it, kind of like a puzzle that's to be worked out. And I've gotten lost with this play in particular, I think at the beginning, where I really tried to figure out exactly what was going on. As I did when I was an actor in the play Pomona. I played the character of Charlie. And
That's another Alistair McDowell play, yeah.
And then recently reading the play X and trying to figure out
another Alistair McDowell play.
Yeah, I love this guy. And
I hope he's listening.
It's just always so interesting. I think he writes very, very accessibly too. I think it's difficult to memorize, but it's very rolls off the tongue, and it doesn't feel stilted in any way.
His dialogue.
Yeah. And you know, he's a little irreverent with his characters. He's very realistic with the characters. And he's not afraid to set something like with a time machine in it, or on Pluto, or in some, mysterious underground bunker where people are having their organs taken out. And it's, it seems kind of vulgar and scary, but his work is often vulgar and scary and really mesmerizing because of that, and then also humorous in other parts to kind of just have this huge breadth of ups and downs. I just really like it.
Well, we've talked around this play a little bit, and you've mentioned Pomona and X and some of his other stuff. Ryan, what's this play about? What's Brilliant Adventures about?
I think it's about brotherhood in some ways. I think it's about figuring out where exactly you fit into the world. I think that there are certain characters. I think every character is on a particular, and just from my reading of it, every character is on a journey of discovery as far as finding out who they are and how they fit into the world. I would argue that Ben is the farthest along, and arguably that has to do just because he's older.
That's you. You play Ben, the very, very old guy.
He is. He's extremely old. But
as 32?
That's
like the oldest guy you've ever played.
Yeah. Yes. He has a better sense, I think, than some of the other characters do of who they are and how they fit into the world and how they can make the world better for themselves.
Okay, be a little more specific for me. A journey of discovery, finding out who you are. We can say that about a lot of plays,
certainly.
Right? But Brilliant Adventures is not like a lot of plays.
Not at all, no.
It's very different. And we've given spoiler warnings before, and I'll give one again. If you really want to be surprised and somehow managed to miss it, Ann-Marie said in the first 5 minutes, time machine and cardboard box. Well, stop listening now, because we'll probably put some spoilers out there. What are the plot points of the play that make it so unique? I mean, the things that you've talked about, the growth of characters and the character arcs and the struggle to maintain family, all those things, I can think of a half a dozen plays off the top of my head that do that. This one does it differently. How does it do it differently?
It is. The family is rife with dysfunction.
Yeah.
The brothers, you get a sense from one of the characters that the brothers have always had a certain connection. However, they're almost like two, in a way, they're almost like two stranded lovers who just never can find each other at the right time.
Wow, that's interesting.
And well, at this point, they're unique characters in the sense, I think, that they are virtually never on the same page. And yet, when it's time to be on the same page, they get there very quickly. And they're just very different people.
Yeah.
And I think Ben and Greg, in a lot of ways, offset that very well, because Greg, in a lot of ways, wants to be somebody like Ben, wants to be somebody who rises above, whatever it is that he's come from and that he's dealt with before.
Yeah, Ben, your character comes into this setting from outside. He's an outsider.
He is an outsider. He's
sort of inserting
outsider.
himself into a situation. What's his story?
I think he's an outsider in the sense that it doesn't talk about this necessarily, but you get the sense that he perhaps had a different path for himself laid out, and maybe it was a path that was not laid out by him, but by somebody else. And he didn't take that path. I believe he took his own path and has reached the point that he is because he decided to do exactly what he wanted to do.
He's a gangster. He's a criminal.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Very much so. But he's also, in a lot of ways, he's an exceptionally bright character. And one thing that he notices very quickly is the dysfunction between the two brothers. And there is the caper in a lot of ways is just how quickly and swiftly he can manipulate the situation. And playing that was certainly a lot of fun because McDowell writes those twists and turns so well, I think. And, you know, the secret to a lot of this acting stuff is that when it's written that well, a lot of the work is done for you.
Right. You can enjoy the
You
ride.
can just, you just trust it's really easy to trust the writing because it's just so good.
You know what I think is interesting about your character is that, I mean, I hate to classify people this way, but they all seem to be a bunch of bottom feeders. And Ben especially, he seems to understand how that system works, right? There's like a class system amongst all of these brothers, this brotherhood of bottom feeders. And he's able to take advantage of desperate people. And so in terms of the class system, he's at the top of the class system to me. But in terms of appeal, I find him to be at the bottom because he's so mercenary.
Oh, I think that's true.
So I've been pleading for specificity. None of you want to do it. Ann-Marie, you passed. Ryan, you
what do you
passed.
wanna know?
Well, I want somebody.
you know.
I'm going to just do it then, since no one
Do
wants
it,
to.
Joe.
I'll
Do it.
tell
You
We
do
can't
it.
read your mind.
I will just tell you that Brilliant Adventures is set in a very specific location on the outskirts of London, I believe.
Middlesbrough. Yep.
A very specific location in England, a depressed area. It's set in the flat of two brothers and their sort of ne'er-do-well friend who probably are drug dealers and do whatever they can, struggling to get by. The entire area is depressed. Into this situation comes your character, Ryan Ben, who discovers that in this flat, one of these genius brothers has actually invented a time machine, a working time machine, and he sets upon a plan to get that for himself, threatening everybody and all their relationships in the process. That's
Correct. You're right. That's what
Oh,
happens.
that's
Oh,
what it's
you-
about.
You
You
passed,
genuinely
Joe.
just wanted to know
You're the
what-
best.
What's going to happen.
You're the best.
Can we all just take a moment
wow.
of silence
You've definitely read the play.
for how cool I am?
Yeah, no, for sure.
Golf clap.
Tiny claps.
That's not silence.
Oh, brother.
I didn't clap for whatever it's
Oh,
worth.
good Lord. Okay. I'm not
Can't
even
even
in
do
silence.
that, right?
Well, I mean, but no, the reason I wanted to be so specific, Ryan, is because you used a word that I really liked when you were describing it. You said caper. You said the caper of the play. Is that does that resonate with you? Jake?
I just like that. I usually like shows and stuff or anything that has a caper. I'm like, let's pretend this one does, and it does. I mean, there's stealing and chasing after and people going in and out of doors.
There's a lot
There
of
is
door
a
work.
sense of
There's some
An
advanced
exchange
door
of
work in this show.
objects.
well, and
Yeah.
there's big
Whole
weight to.
rehearsals
I was just talking with Ann-Marie about it. She kind of helped me realize something that there's weight to. Something that happens. Are we allowed to talk about spoiler moments?
Absolutely.
I
when
just
you-
said time machine.
I tried
There are-
desperately
let
to
me
stay
tell
away
you-
from it.
Yeah, I
but
know. You were doing the right thing. You're
I
like,
was
I don't know if we can
rebuked
spoil
heinously.
this.
What we've
Aggressively rebuked.
what we've discovered in talking to people who actually listen to these podcasts, and you'll be surprised, people actually listen to these podcasts.
In Greece.
Nobody was more surprised than I. But anyway, what we learned from some of the people that listen to these is often they will start to listen, and then they'll turn it off. They'll watch the play, and then they'll come back after seeing the show to sort of get a sense of what maybe we were thinking about, or trying to find
Well,
answers
in
to
plays-
questions that weren't answered during the buzz for them.
There's a lot to unpack in plays.
It's true.
Right? And so sometimes you want to unpack with different voices and different perspectives.
And we've only been doing sort of the current season for these podcasts for a short time. I mean, we did we started all of this, of course, during the lockdown because there was nothing else to do, and we had the microphones and what the heck. So we decided when the lockdown ended to continue and use these as promotions. And yes, they serve that purpose as well. But I think also they just give people an idea of what goes on in the rehearsal process, that they don't always get to see what goes on in your mind as a director, what goes on in your mind, Ryan, as a
I
performer.
secretly like it too because it actually helps prepare me for the performance, right?
Yeah.
I haven't been with this play for a couple of years now because we read it during the lockdown.
And we were working on other things.
And we're working on other things. So now it gives me an opportunity to look at the play prior to the performance at the library. And then it spawns all of these great conversations. Like Jake and I had a nice conversation on the way over here.
So let's talk about some of that specificity. Then we talked about its setting. Why is the setting so important? And just remind us where it's set.
It's set in Middlesbrough in a council-owned flat, so it's basically public housing in a sense that is run down with drugs. I think there's a reference to, and we talked about this early on in a rehearsal, that the setting is almost somewhat apocalyptic, at least in this town, because there's made reference to a horse just outside.
What are you doing? Is that your horse out there? What? Is that your horse at the front? Yeah, why would I have a horse? There's a horse knocking about outside your door. But there's loads of them around here. Oh, I thought it was going to charge me. Your head bought me or something. Charge you? Yeah. People get killed by horses all the time. They stomp on you and that.
We read it through a few times, and Josh Berg, who's playing Rob, was like, "Hey, I've been meaning to bring up, I don't know, I was like, what's with the horse?" And I'm like, that is a fair point.
You were hoping no one would ask? Were you just surprised by the horse?
Like I said, there's certain puzzles in this play that I'm like, I don't get it. Maybe I'm a bad director, but I'm also like, then I ask other people, and they're like, I have no idea. And I'm like, okay, I'm not the only one. But I think we've settled on...
Is horse metaphor for moped?
See, that's the thing. The characters speak of it as though it's just a really commonplace thing. Like it just doesn't. It's not all that surprising at all. In fact, one of them asks him if it's his horse.
Is it set in the 1600s in Middlesbrough?
No, but there is a reference.
2010.
Where Ben says that he likes this area because it reminds him of the Wild West.
Yes,
right?
You're
so
right.
maybe they're tying those two ideas together.
There's sci-fi elements and Western elements. And I watched an interview where Alistair McDowell talked about how he liked to write in a way where it's not a jumbled mess by any means, but he said, I have a lot of influences, whether it be, books, movies, TV shows, animes that I've watched, and I like to write from that place, which includes all of it. So sometimes you get things that are like, what was that? But I liked it. It's interesting. And
well, that must really. I'm sorry to interrupt, but that must really speak to you, Jake, because I know you have a real interest in science fiction, in that in that sort of genre, but also in video games and gaming and that whole idea. And I know that you brought some of those elements to bear. Yeah, it must feel very familiar.
Yeah, I don't know what set me on that direction, but I think he mentioned something. He was like, I really just like to do what I like to do, and if you've got a good idea, go with it. And I was like, I don't know if this is a good idea or not, but I just really am influenced by video games and think they have the potential to tell great stories and affect me on deep levels the way plays do, or books or movies. And so there was an element of, this is such a bad idea, but I want to do it. I want to take maybe some video game music and put it in here. And what if we took one of my favorite games ever, Undertale, which was created by Toby Fox, and it's just a one-man operation where he designed the game, made the music, all this. And it fascinated me. A friend of mine had recommended that I play it, and he's like, don't go into it knowing anything. And I played it through for maybe 10 hours, and I cried. Like that was influential for me to go, wow, games really can be profound. And for some reason, reading this play, Brilliant Adventures, and seeing these characters that had all these flaws and were so unappealing right off the bat. I think anime does that as well. Makes these characters that you start off a show and go, oh, these are going to be secondary or peripheral characters that aren't a big deal. And then later, as the story progresses, you go, oh, this is the main character of the show. And then they endear themselves to you. So I just wanted to kind of meld those two worlds together and see what happened. And I think we've got some interesting things happening with it.
So what's coming up at A Public Fit? Well, we've been talking with Jake Staley and Ryan Ruckman about Alistair McDowell's Brilliant Adventures. You can attend that stage reading on Friday, January 27th, or Saturday, January 28th at the Clark County Library on Flamingo Road. Tim Crouch's An Oak Tree opens February 3rd and runs through the 27th at Super Summer Theater Studios. A different, unrehearsed actor each performance. So pick your pony on that one. We're back to the library for our third stage reading of the season, Octavio Solis' Lydia on March 31st and April 1st. And then we're continuing our partnership with the College of Southern Nevada. Our final main stage production, August Wilson's The Piano Lesson, will be presented in their state-of-the-art black box beginning April 7th. Last but certainly not least, Aubrey Cephales's beautifully poetic Alabaster will close out the season with a stage reading on June 30th and July 1st back at the Flamingo Library. And there's more behind the buzz, too. Look for new podcasts accompanying each of our shows and stage readings. Actually, next week or so, we'll be dropping a very special episode, a conversation with an Oak Tree playwright, Tim Crouch. So keep clicking refresh. So am I hearing you say that this is not a serious play for theater folks? This is a play for 13-year-old gamers.
Yeah, I don't know.
No.
Well, here was
That
an
group will
interesting.
certainly find something to
Here was an interesting topic Brianne, my wife, brought up, and I don't remember who mentioned it, but it was like, do you want to do theater that's for everyone? Yes. But then there's also a part of me that's like, I want to do theater for people like me sometimes, or I want to do theater or whatever art, and it's for 20% of you, right? It's for 20% of the people. And the other 80%, and we've talked about this very specifically with one moment in the show that we've spent a whole rehearsal on. And I think afterward, I was just like, I think 80% of the people are going to hate this moment, but I love it. And I hope you love it too.
That reminds me, I was in a theater, 30 years ago maybe, to see a production of Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot. And I'm sitting there minding my own business before the curtain went up, and I heard the people behind me sort of poo-pooing the notion of absurdism and poo-pooing the idea of Beckett writ large, and they were only there because someone had given them those tickets, and so they were there to see the show, and they didn't really that was going to be. And by the end of the show, their world had changed. Their whole perspective had changed. So theater that really wasn't, or they didn't think was being created for them, by the end of the show, they were sold. And the funniest, I don't know if it was the funniest thing, but at the end of the show, the man looked at the program and he said, "Samuel Beckett, I wonder what else he's written." Because now they're going to go out and find these types of plays. And maybe that's what you're doing as well, is if you present something that maybe only appeals to that 20% or to you or to whomever, and you present it in an interesting, fascinating way. Yeah. That's the goal, right?
Absolutely. And I think we're doing that. I want to have a balance between, and again, I always go back to anime. It's something I've thought they do really well is present this kind of absurdist comedy for about 90% of it, and then all of a sudden you get to this 10% that becomes deadly serious. Yeah. And it's a gut punch every time for me when I watch it. And I was like, how can we do that in theater too? Sometimes I see productions or whatever, and you're like, okay, this is a serious play, and okay, there's some comedy in it, but it's mainly pretty serious. Versus the idea of, oh, this is really funny, really, really funny and absurd, and then it got deadly serious.
See, that's remarkable, because the first thing that occurs to me when you say that is your production of Gloria, which is a play. I don't have to tell you guys. You all saw the reading, I'm sure. But for the first act of that play, it's a lot of silly banter, office banter, people making fun of each other, some casual racism thrown in just for fun, and then literally the last 5 minutes of the play is a mass shooting. Yeah, where a woman comes in and just slaughters everyone. That kind of sounds like what you're talking about a little bit.
Yeah. And, I think that's written into that play really well, Brandon Jacobs. And to be fair, both Brandon Jacobs Jenkins and Alistair McDowell are millennials. And I'm not trying to bring up differences of generations, but I was listening to, I can't remember who, or no, this was my wife that brought it up to me again. She influences my work a lot.
Shout out Brianne Janae.
Somebody more intelligent than I had said on some podcast or some YouTube video that's a really good expert in dissecting things. He was like, a lot of millennials are now we're in our 30s, early 40s now, I think it may stretch to.
I think so.
And a lot of our stories have become about, when written by them, it's about capitalism and daddy issues. Yeah. And I'm like, wow, yeah, that's exactly what my play is about. Not my play, our play is about that I'm directing. There's so there's daddy issues in it, and there's capitalism pointing fingers, I think, a little bit. And this was back in 2010 too. That was 12 years ago that he
As an older millennial, Ryan, does that speak to you?
Yeah, absolutely. As an older millennial, yeah, certainly.
Very,
The old
old.
man at the
Yeah,
table.
yeah,
Very,
absolutely.
very, very old.
In my
Actually,
vast and learned experience.
I should explain this stupid inside joke. Ryan is a graduate student out at UNLV. We've been working with his wife much more than we've been working with him. I think this is the first thing you've done with us here at APF. Yeah. But one of the things that we had noticed, and that every time we would see Ryan perform out at NCT, he was exclusively cast in these sort of older roles, and
Like
so
a 70-year-old man.
yeah, doddering canes, wheelchairs, funny walks, white beards. And we would tease Betsy relentlessly about this because it was funny. And then we met Ryan and just sort of kept the joke going.
Yeah. That's good.
You're what, 40?
I am.
Yeah, so that maybe that's old for a graduate student at UNLV.
Perhaps,
and you deserve all those
yeah.
rules. So that's that inside joke explained. But so as an older millennial, I mean, that's really what you are.
Yeah.
Does what Jake says, does that make sense?
Oh, I think so. Absolutely. I mean, there's, and even speaking from the perspective of the character of Ben, you not only have the capitalistic type of thing, but you also have, even more relevant to what's going on now in our society, this autocratic type of leader who wants this sort of like control over everything and knows how to exploit the people at the very bottom. He even says as much, knows how to exploit the people at the very bottom and get them to rise to action and fight against their own interests in order to create the world he is trying to create.
Ben comes in and kind of buys up the loyalties of people in town and creates a little army almost and some real estate purchases in order to really take over this whole area as a gangster. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, you're fucking well loaded then!
All right.
So have you got a mansion or something? What? Like a mint car, Ferrari?
I'm not really into things like that.
You're pretty young now, aren't you?
I suppose.
How old are you?
I'm 32.
Oh. It's not that young, man. So what's your secret?
My secret?
Yeah, well, what's your secret? How can I, as a businessman just starting out, get proper loaded like you?
Well, it's not so much a secret.
Oh, I mean, just do us a favour. How can I be like you?
There's a he's an interesting character to play because there always has to be, and Jake's good about keeping track of this. There always has to be this tinge of ruthlessness to him, and yet there has to be a reason that these characters welcome him into their lives.
Yeah.
Beyond just, wanting to make more money.
Wanting more money,
and beyond wanting some sort of like monetary gain. I mean, and he even talks about how Rob isn't necessarily somebody who's trying to rule the world by any stretch of the imagination, but he does know what he wants in the sense that it's easy for him to exploit that.
This sounds like a really dark play. Why do I remember reading it and thinking it was a comedy?
Oh, it's because it's fucking hilarious. I mean, sorry, you can. Yeah,
No.
It's because it's hilarious. It really is. It really is.
The writing is very on point. There's just so many things that he'll write that I'm like, I don't know if you could say that anymore per se and be funny. At least, maybe that was another play. Actually, I don't think there's anything in this that's... No, we've definitely added some things that are somewhat offensive, but I did ask one actor.
I need to start attending more rehearsals?
One of you two might want to check before we open it. This one's there's one moment that I even asked the actor. I was like, "Are you comfortable doing that? Are you sure?" And they're like, "Yeah." I'm like, "All right, then do it bigger."
Oh boy.
Ann-Marie, you got to go into rehearsal tomorrow.
Oh, send the female in with all the boys.
That's another thing.
So
This is an all-male cast. Does that change the dynamic of rehearsals? We can speak freely. Pretend that
sure.
Diane and Ann-Marie
Yeah.
aren't here. Can we? Does it change the dynamic of the way you guys work without having to?
I thought the only thing I was worried about was maybe an ego butting heads, and then that has not been an issue whatsoever.
I don't feel like that's been an issue at all.
I've lucked out twice with having both with Gloria and now with this one, a cast full of people that are really amiable menschy people. They're menches, like straight.
Jake, it's
But-
not luck. Give yourself some credit.
Well,
you audition and cast them. They didn't
yes,
fall
yes,
from
yes.
the sky
But some
as
people
gifts from heaven.
You don't know, and you can't exactly. You'll occasionally. We've all been part of plays or directed plays that you go, ooh,
I got an asshole.
Well,
Found an asshole
and
here,
I've just there's an element of luck in that because you have 15. Sometimes you only have 15 to a half hour to really kind of get a feel for somebody and then go, yeah, we don't have any more time. You're cast. You're in. Yeah. But no, I think it's pretty lighthearted. But I don't think it's that much different than if you added a...
Oh, no, I disagree. If you added a female character to the text, he would change the way these young men would communicate with each other. There's a certain... They talk about things amongst themselves that they would not talk about if there was a woman there. Yeah,
which is interesting because there was... I can't remember who did it. There was a production that they made the two... spoiler alert! They made both Lukes women. They cast them both as female actors, and I thought about that. And I thought, oh, that'd be interesting. But you're right. There are certain elements that would kind of be like, oh, well, how does that play? And they talk about masturbation. They talk about this, that, and the other. That you're like, yeah, that probably wouldn't be a mixed company discussion.
Right.
So
I think it's also important because we were talking about this before to remember that there is a decidedly British angle to this.
Oh, yeah.
And the humor that comes along with it. There is a much more cutting kind of humor that they are more comfortable with that I don't think always translates over here. We often just view it as being mean. And in a lot of ways it is, but it also is simply how they communicate with one another and have... It's a much older society than ours. They've been doing it a long time, and they have a certain comfort level with cutting at one another, and it kind of is how they all communicate in a lot of ways. There's a playfulness to them tearing each other down, which is
it's so
really
elevated,
funny to watch.
Elevated and elegant as well, so you laugh along with it rather than you want to avoid sarcasm.
Disgusting and beautiful all at the same time.
But because it's funny, it passes the test for really go for it.
I actually have a question for you two gentlemen because it's obvious that you are not English, right? And you do have a Brit amongst you, and we also have friends that are Brits.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you've had to rely on those Brits in order to find the story?
Are there secrets that were sort of lost in translation until...
I just felt that way when I was working on Beauty Queen of Leenane. I worked with Daz, whose mother is Irish, and he kind of helped me understand those Irish sensibilities. So.
Yes, we've got Josh Berg again, who's wonderful and is playing Rob, and I've had to, rely on him a little bit. Same with Andrew Calvert, to be like, hey, is that what I think it is? And he's also come to light with certain things. He's like, yeah, this way of speaking, he's talking about verbs and certain nouns and the way a sentence is structured and kind of the inflection too at the end. It just kind of means this, and you go, oh, okay. It was last week that I was having a Jake Sidholm say a line a certain way because I was for certain that it was a certain way, and then Brian had to take me aside and be like, that's not what that means. And I was like, you sure? I'm pretty positive. And then we asked Josh, and Josh was like, no, Brian's right. I was like, oh yeah, all right, cool.
Why do we keep hiring him? Why are we hiring Brian, apparently?
It's all my good work comes from her.
I mean, Josh was quick to point out too, he's like, I'm not from this area.
Yeah.
He goes, I'm not from Yorkshire. I'm not from that area. I'm not from that part of England. He goes, I know people that are from that area. And he obviously has a very good sense of what that accent should sound like. But he was quick to point out, he's like, I'm not from there. He goes, and I guarantee you there are bits and pieces of this that are, to quote one of the characters, Middlesbrough jokes that you're not supposed to get. Like there are those instances where you get the impression that there are things about the way they talk and the things that they like they're really into chicken parmesan sandwiches. And I don't know why in that part of the world. And he can't explain that either. Like we talked about, he goes, I guess they like those.
I'm having the rest of your camel. Well, come on, Dan, that's what you did. Yeah, that's why. But you don't deserve it. You didn't know what to want me on Dad for that. Has he told you why he doesn't want me round anymore? He doesn't want me moving in either. Well, I can understand why he wouldn't want a stack of sausage dog shite Like you here.
0.1% of the theater audience.
Yeah.
Probably even smaller.
Holy
I
cow.
mean, these are small towns.
No one
like-
is gonna like this show.
Or maybe get some of those references. But I think
but-
I've always enjoyed, one of the things that I always have found fascinating about watching, old shows on BBC. Now, of course, we have so much access to all of this content with even like Game of Thrones, a fantasy world, and The Crown, and these BBC mystery series that we can access now online. I've always just been fascinated by trying to decipher those cultural references and just sort of let them, sort of float over me, and they're easy to embrace, I think, if they're just accepted and without too many fingers pointing at them, too much flags pinned on them, I think, make them less effective.
I think too we're making the assumption that if we are not like the people of the play, or we have not been to the places where the people of the play have been, or we don't embrace the cultural norms of the people of the play, that we're not going to like the people of the play. But I love the people of the play, and I'm nothing like the people of the
Right.
play. So, and I think that goes for lots of people, because lots of people are empathetic.
Well, it goes for lots of plays, too.
Yeah.
And you definitely have with the science fiction element that we keep making mention of, but I'm going to try really hard not to just say blatantly. With that science fiction element that you have sort of these interweaving fish out of water characters where technically none of them are from this council flat. Like, the only reason Luke lives there is because he's on a certain level of benefits, and that's where they put him.
Yeah.
But Rob doesn't live in that part of town. Greg doesn't live in that part of town. I mean, and Ben obviously doesn't live in that part of town. In a lot of ways, they're all outsiders, but the real fun fish out of water part is how this thing that he created in this place. And I think there's something to that also that's really fascinating and fun to watch.
Yeah.
Isn't his...
Not having access to this won't hurt you at all, to those of you who don't know anything about northeastern England.
Isn't his flat have no windows? Like the room where he creates things?
He's got them shuttered.
Yeah.
He's got
His bedroom doesn't
His
have
bedroom
windows.
doesn't. Right. He that's why he works in his bedroom. He doesn't sleep in his bedroom. He sleeps in the living room. And Ben pieces it together. He's like, "Do you work in there because there's no windows in there? So you don't want people stealing your ideas." Got
Right.
it.
I think that's kind of like a metaphor for his character, because he doesn't need to be seen.
Yeah.
Right? He doesn't need to show off. He doesn't need a degree. He doesn't need any of those things. What he really wants to do is just go into this dark room and create these things. He doesn't even want to use the time machine because he doesn't want to hurt society.
Right.
He's really aware of the butterfly effect and how damaging that can be. So I find that endearing, that he, in a way, yes, the government has allowed him to live in this place, but in a way, he's chosen it as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because there is, Rob gets on him, and so does Ben, about like, you're so much better than everyone else. You could have done all these things, and you kind of chose not to. You kind of said, "Screw it, I'm gonna defy all that and do this other thing." And yeah, that's an interesting point. And why does he do it that way? I don't know that I have the exact answer for that, outside of dysfunctional family issues and patterns set by his dad, who's a drug addict, and we haven't even touched on that whole character either.
Right. Well, maybe we leave that one to be a surprise.
Yeah.
That'll be an interesting surprise. Those of you who love Timothy Cummings and want to see him in an entirely new light are going to want to attend this reading just for that.
Oh, yeah.
Ryan, you used another word that I like, or phrase rather. So you're 2 for 2 now. You got caper going, but you also said science fiction, and we didn't.
I'm certainly not the first person to use that one. In this
well, no, I mean,
conversation.
talking about this play, yeah. Well, today, why aren't there? I mean, this is, I guess, at its root, it is described as a science fiction play. I would call it. There's science fiction elements in it. We're talking about a time machine, and as far as I know, that hasn't been invented yet. Why aren't there more science fiction plays? That feels like a genre that is actually not quite. It's not very prevalent in the theater, which is odd because they're so popular in TV and movies and other media forms. Why not?
My guess.
And you love them,
but I might be wrong. I do, and I can't off the top of my head think of too many. But
Well, they're all written by Alistair McDowell.
And I like them all. They're probably kind of hard to produce. I mean, there's certain things in it. And actually, now that I think about it, his other play, Glow, I think, is probably the most difficult. There are tall order asks for example, in this show, spoiler alert, it's like they use the time machine, and it says there's a brilliant light that comes out of it, and there's smoke, there's effects there, there's also the
Miss Saigon landed a helicopter on stage.
That's true.
Phantom of the Opera dropped a chandelier on the audience.
That's when they can afford to.
Starlight Express, they implanted all the actors with wheels. They surgically implanted all their actors with
but
wheels.
what Alistair McDowell has done is he's created a low budget science fiction play.
That's true.
Right? The time travel machine is a cardboard box, right? It seems like the opposite of what science fiction would be. Normally when we watch these shows on the intertubes, right? They have these huge budgets, and so oftentimes playwrights think of science fiction and they think of it as a limitation, right? In order to create a play, because you need such a big budget in order to accomplish it.
Yeah, I think there's also the stigmas, right? We're there against science fiction as well. That's not real art. A little.
No, I disagree.
Oh, I agree.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I would
disagree?
think you would have some people turning your nose up at being like, "Oh, it's a science fiction." Oh well.
Well, let's step out of
It's
theater.
arguably one of those things that has levels. Like,
Yeah.
people argue over what the level of a certain thing is. I mean, you might talk about having, or degrees maybe, because people like to put things into a box. I mean, where does the movie Alien rate against something like Starship Troopers versus something like the Star Trek saga versus something like Star Wars? I mean, some of it I think people view as being amateurish, and then there are other things that I guess kind of just exceed this genre. I suppose you could say
I would
that
push
about
back against the word
anything,
amateurish, but I would say hokey. And I think I see your
okay.
point, because I think what
hokey's
you're
probably
suggesting
a
is
better
that
word.
some have a different sort of appeal.
Sure.
Yeah, and some try to be a little more highbrow. Blade Runner,
Right.
perhaps
Yeah.
feels a little more highbrow than what did you mention? Starship Troopers.
Yeah.
which is
I mean,
movie made
it's-
by a man who hates humanity. I
True.
think,
It's a fun movie to talk about. You could have entire podcasts about it because it was a very misunderstood film based on, having seen things about it. But yeah, that type of thing. There's a hokiness to that. Hokey's probably a good word for
Yeah.
it. I think of amateurish, and I think about the fact that there's an entire cottage industry of film where people take movies like Pacific Rim and make something called Atlantic Rim. And it's just a lower budget version of the
You know
exact
what?
same
That's
thing.
absolutely
It's
fair.
Unapologetically,
I stand corrected. You are absolutely fair.
that's specifically what I was talking about when I said amateurish. So perhaps it's not fair.
I love it. But
on a
you
broader-
disagree, Ann-Marie. You think that there's a...
Well, I can just remember, I haven't watched it in years, but Firefly and its use of language, right? I thought there were that.
and was canceled after
Yeah,
way
I don't
too
mean
soon.
to be Dwight from The Office, but also Battlestar Galactica is amazing.
Which was
Yes.
canceled after...
Well,
Seasons? Was it six?
No,
I know,
yeah.
it did,
It's a
yeah,
while.
it's a
What's
Wow.
that?
Loved
And there's
it.
that other
That's fair.
sci-fi that is so complicated that I haven't even been able to get into
And,
yet.
no, and that's fair, but I will just point out that none of the things that we've been talking about in the last 3 minutes are plays.
Right,
It's all
you're right,
TV and movies, and yes, there is an aspect of it as being I don't think capital A art, but certainly thoughtful. They're thoughtful productions, and I don't think that anyone could look at the Battlestar Galactica revamp series and
Well,
not
I think what he's
recognize
done
it being highbrow.
and what was mentioned earlier is he's created like a true mashup. Like it's a family drama, right? It's sci-fi, it's Wild West, it's about brotherhood.
It's a 24-hour play in one living room the whole time. Yeah, I mean, you can do it.
It's a mashup. He didn't limit himself by saying, "Oh, well, you can't do that in a play."
Oh no,
you
but
can't do that in a play.
just remember what my original question was, which was why aren't there more science
I don't know,
fiction
there should
plays?
be. You're right. There should. I mean, there should be.
I wish there were. I wish there were because I would produce them. I wish there were. Going off topic here. I wish there were more plays about the environment, but we're not writing those plays.
Right.
We have a tendency to think of plays in a certain way, and they're typically family dramas or deeper, in a sense. So. I wish there were plays that talked about a wide breadth of stories.
And speaking of sci-fis that speak about the environment,
Yes.
X.
Oh, is that a?
It's
Yes.
actually about that.
That's
yeah.
Alistair.
Yeah,
Yeah, and we're-
McDowell,
Yeah, and we're going to read
So
it
we're gonna
because
tease that
that's
out, see where that goes.
a subject I'm very interested in.
Yeah.
Okay, we're setting up a reading at the house for that.
Yeah.
We're
Yes.
not. We're not putting that on.
We're not producing it
Well, we might.
yet.
Yet. Who
Yet.
knows? Who knows? Who knows? What's a? I'm going to switch gears a little bit. You've talked about just the vastness of sort of the setting and the strangeness of it being set in a place that you might not completely understand. What other are the other bigger challenges in staging this one, Jake?
There is a recently we've overcome a challenge, or at least a mental block in my mind. I wanted to do this. Oh, should I spoil more? Yeah, why
Spoil
not?
away. We've got
No
the
one's
spoiler
going to
alerts
get
up.
spoilers. Are crazy. We're doing this extended sequence, we'll say, that has changing tempos and music and kind of choreography, and that's not something I've ever really sunk my teeth into. And I mean, I certainly have a dance degree, but
Yeah, you never stop talking about it. Always
Joe started it,
flashing
everyone.
your
Just
dance
to let you know,
degree
you
around.
started this war, and I will finish it. But it was something that I almost talked myself out of, and I talked myself out of one or two things from Glory. I can't remember specifically what, but just making some riskier, bolder, kind of ridiculous choices that I'm like, maybe you wouldn't make these for a main stage show. And I'm glad, and I'm thankful, grateful. I've had a discussion with both of you about this recently, where you both reaffirmed, like, no, this is the opportunity and the chance to make those choices, because this is more of a, while we're doing completely legitimate theater here, and it's fully produced in a way, it's a chance to make choices and fail big if we're going to fail.
Well,
And
you want to talk about
that's
that, about a little bit about that, Ann-Marie, about the nature and advantages of the readings and what they allow in terms of risk taking.
Well, I can talk about it in terms of my own experience directing main stage shows versus directing readings. What we want to do for the public, whether it's a reading or main stage shows, we want to tell a good story.
Always.
Always. And what I love about the readings is the readings are free. So it's like theater for all. It's not, right? You don't need to be rich in order to attend the theater. And while our ticket prices are pretty reasonable, some people cannot afford a $40 ticket. And so that's the advantage of the readings. But the pressure that I feel when I'm producing a show, because we are charging the public, is different. I love when I'm working on a reading and I say, I have this idea, I have this inspiration, I have this itch, I have this thing I want to try. And I'm like, yeah, let's just do it and see what happens. And there seems to be there's less pressure for this grand outcome. I just kind of put it out there and I see what happens. And because I take that pressure off myself, it seems like there's more of a freedom in the rehearsal. Like everybody is a little bit more loose about things. And then it ends up usually working out because the pressure is not there. And I wish I could maintain that feeling in everything that I do, because that's really like when you're in your flow state.
Yep.
Does that speak to you, Jake?
Yeah, I mean, I remember reading something or hearing something that was like, the only way to really be creative is have a safe environment where you trust those around you and you don't feel like you're going to get your neck swiped or whatever. But also the stakes have been, I keep using stakes, but the pressure's off. The sense of judgment is kind of lighter. And because of that, you're able, like Ann-Marie just said, to be freer and make bigger choices and honestly be more truly flow-like creativity going into it. It feels pure. It feels like, yeah, that's what I would do without all these other voices in my head that sometimes happen. You can get a little tunnel vision if I'm doing a main stage show or something. Even as an actor, I'm like focused on my thing. And I'm like, oh, I better not mess that up. Versus when it's a reading, I'm like, hey, mess it up. Who cares? Let's go. It's a playground in a sense. It's a sandbox.
Well, it must be paying off. I've lost track of the number of times I've had people come up and talk about their experiences at readings, really enjoying them, but also saying, they're just one step away from a finished production. They're just one step away from being completely polished on their feet. Ryan, you're a grad student, as we've mentioned a couple times at UNLV. This sort of implies a bigger experience and a commitment to to theater. Hey, it's no dance degree, but we can talk about that later.
But what is?
Sorry, Jake. Look, one of these days, ladies and gentlemen, I will let it go. But it just slays me every time I think of Jake and a dance degree. I
can tap, man.
I can't let it go.
I'm
sorry,
tap,
Diane, cut that. That was terrible.
Leave the part where I said I wish I could tap.
I lied.
Legit. I wouldn't be sitting here with you
I lied.
goofballs if I could tap.
Keep all of this. Keep all this. Keep this too. Keep it all.
I'd be tap dancing
But
away.
I wonder what your experience is with stage readings and how it feels as an actor. I don't know whether you've done dozens of stage readings, whether this is your first one, whether the idea of working with a script in hand is liberating or constricting, or how do you feel about it?
I've done stage readings before, but I've certainly never done one. I've never been involved in a process quite like this, where there were this many rehearsals and there was this amount of consideration given to the blocking and the other elements of the show. And I think that I can't speak to how anybody else did it, but for that reason alone, I felt that I could not really change the way I prepared for it all that much.
Yeah.
So I've treated the prep for this, and Jake and I have talked about this along the way. The prep for this, I've treated exactly the same way as I would treat anything else, because I feel like you have to. You have that script in your hand, certainly, but let's suppose for a moment that it falls out of your hand. Well, we can't, just as we couldn't really bring everything to a grinding halt before, we certainly can't do it now either. So I think there's a certain element of needing to know the material backwards and forwards that is just as prevalent here, if not more so, even.
Do you feel the sort of freedom that Ann-Marie and Jake were talking about in terms of taking risks and feeling?
I don't know that has to. For my personal, I don't know that has to do with this style of production as much as it does, honestly, with Jake. And clearly this is clearly this is a trickle down type thing, and clearly that freedom for him came from Ann-Marie and from you, and so. I don't think it has much of anything to do with the process itself. I think it has to do with the people involved in the process. So I've never felt like there was something I couldn't do or something that I did that was too much or anything like that.
Oh, that's fun.
I would agree. There's a lot of times, I'm just thinking back, a lot of times I'm like, oh, this is like the general way the world works, and then a lot of people have to be like, that might just be you, man. And then I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. That is just kind of how my mind works, and I assume everybody else's minds works kind of the same way.
You guys both know that after all of our performances, after all of our readings, we invite the audience to come back. We stick around. This podcast is named after that event, Behind the Buzz. We call that the Buzz. And I'm wondering if looking forward, if you might want to make a prediction or two about where you think the buzz for this show might go. I always find that interesting to sort of imagine what an audience might dig their heels into. You got something, Ann-Marie?
Yeah, Jake and I were talking about this at the end, that the play doesn't wrap itself up into
a neat little bow.
Right.
It does not.
And it leaves a lot of open-ended questions. And something that I thought about on the way home is it forces you to look at the play in terms of, I think, your own cynicism. Like, does it have a cynical ending? Does it have a more positive ending? Does it work out for this family?
Oh, so you get to identify who you are based upon your reaction to the play.
I think so, because he doesn't put the given circumstances in the play he doesn't give you the clues in order to figure it out, is my understanding.
Yeah, there's still questions that I have on, what exactly happens with where Luke's character ends up, where does Rob's character end up. We're pretty sure, at least the script tells us, fairly certain what happens to Ben. We don't know what happens to Tim's character, who's playing the man. We don't know. We're maybe less concerned with what happens with Greg, but not that he's not.
Nobody likes Greg.
He's had his. He's just an awful character. It's a very good character. It's just there's less questions surrounding maybe what
fate
happens. Yeah, because he kind of finishes his arc.
Yeah,
I think, and you go, okay, I'm confident in what he's going to do. But in the more I think about it, there's a specific. I'm spoiling everything. Listen to this after you're done with the show. There's a specific time that they jump back to in this time machine, and I'm like, why does that make sense? Why does he go back to that time? Why does he put the fishbowl back on his head? Why does he put his dead dad and he rolls him into the time machine, takes it back in time? What good's that going to do? This is a year before Luke's born. there's more than just that. It's a bunch of things that the more I thought about it, the more I'm like, this doesn't matter. This does not matter.
I've got a lot of questions now.
Yeah, I mean, it matters in a way, but there's more the feeling, and the feeling is that he's going back to rectify things, So that's the general impression, and that's enough to go off of. But we might get caught in the weeds with the buzz with what I just did, a bunch of that. Well, what about this? Well, what about this? What about this?
Yeah.
But hopefully there'll be more. What I think the big themes, or at least forwards and backwards of it, are capitalism, daddy issues, family issues. I know Alistair McDowell writes from a point of view of building off of. He always says he starts his plays with, well, this was a mother-daughter relationship. This is a father and son, and I just started writing about it, and then I decided to set it on Pluto all of a sudden, So it's not like he's going in, I don't think, going, it's set on Pluto, and what are some interesting characters I can set on Pluto? He does it in reverse. So, that's what I think will be discussed.
What do you think, Ryan?
Certainly.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, I think there's one of, I think, the major themes we haven't quite talked about at all is just generally speaking, and I hate using that term, but loyalty.
Yeah.
Who are you loyal to? Whom are you loyal to? What are you loyal, and to what degree? And I think that each of these characters has struggles with that. Except again, I think for Ben, being the slightly older character, I think he has a more concrete sense of what it is he is loyal to and to what religion he ascribes. But at the same time, he also becomes the immovable object that comes up against the unstoppable force,
Yeah.
Or you could call it the other way around. You could call him the unstoppable force. But either way, like he's there to manipulate this situation, and I think that there will be talk of that too.
Right.
What does it take to be able to do something like that? How do we get involved in something like that? How easy is it to do something like that?
So you're saying that it sounds like you're saying that all of these things that we've talked about started to me to sound a little bit out of reach and out of my comfort zone. But you're saying now, Ryan, that this is a pretty accessible play, that people will be able to identify with a lot of these themes.
Oh, I'm pretty sure Jake said it in like minute 2, but yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
To bring it back around, I think this is a very accessible play.
Right on.
I loved it the first time I read it.
Oh,
Oh, absolutely. And I'd never read anything by Alistair McDowell, which is really unfortunate.
Well,
and probably not something I should admit aloud, considering I'm about to get a master's degree at the same time. But again, this is the type of thing where I'm like,
I have a master's degree and I haven't read a lot of it.
Well, yeah, and there's
you're gonna fail your
there's
Alistair
just so
McDowell
much out there.
class.
I will. I definitely, I failed that one. I don't know who they're gonna have to teach it. Probably Jake. But, so maybe I can get some extra credit somewhere. We'll apply like retroactively for being in the show, maybe. But no, there's just I think it's a very accessible. I think it's a very accessible play. I think those 13-year-old video game turds are going to find something they like about it. And the people that love like the highbrow science fiction, they're going to find something they love about it. And people that like weirdo English stories who like BritBox are going to find something they love about it. And
it sounds like in a
the
public
Downton
fit
Abbey
play for
crowd's
sure.
going to find something
There
they
you
like
go.
about it.
Yeah.
If you want an accent, the accent is that of the people who work underground,
The downstairs
the staff.
folks.
Like
Yeah.
they're people from this part of the country.
Got it.
And
Daisy and Mrs. The cook.
I
can't think of her name. I love her, but I can't think of what her name is.
I also have to tip my hat. The actors are doing such an incredible job too. Ryan and Josh in particular really just come out swinging like crazy, and I'm continually impressed with them. Granted, I didn't know them before this process, but I'm both as the director and as an actor, I'm picking up things that they do, and I'm like, ooh, I'm gonna steal that. You're really good. Like they come to the table with these choices and this naturalism. I think I told Ryan at one point, I don't think you could ever go too big to make me not believe you in some way. Like you could make
And that's
of
a
the most
dangerous thing to tell somebody.
I know.
Like me.
Right?
It's maybe a dumb choice.
And I've done my best to respect his wishes, but also to fuck his shit up every day.
No, but it's really incredible. It's fun to watch. Everybody involved is really, doing some great work.
I've loved every second. I love going to these rehearsals. You don't always love going to rehearsal, but I love going to these rehearsals.
Well, you've really expanded, Jake. You've really expanded the APF sort of company. We have a lot of new faces in this one. It's not just Ryan's first time working for APF. You mentioned Josh. We have a couple of folks that we haven't seen on stage for APF before, and that's always exciting to us to feel our numbers swell in that respect. I want to really change gears, really completely change gears for a second. This is our second stage reading of the season, and we're about to go into production with our second main stage show of the season.
Yeah.
You are both scheduled to be second actors for Tim Crouch's An Oak Tree, a play where one actor is constant, the second actor comes in having neither seen nor read the play, completely unrehearsed. And I'm just curious, I'm going to start with you, Ryan.
Sure.
What do you imagine is going to happen? And don't say you have no idea, because that's clearly not true. You have to be imagining something. What do you think that play is going to require of you?
You're not going to get in trouble if you say that you've imagined something.
Absolutely, and that you've thought about it, because you've certainly, hopefully, you've thought about it, and you can't give away any spoilers because you don't know what's.
I have none.
Yeah,
I have none. It's kind of, I would argue, it's kind of the perfect situation, because in a lot of ways, I know that one thing I feel like I do know about it definitively is that there is only one other character. So one thing that I feel like I know about it is that there's a hand there, as far as there's a steady and guiding hand there as far as being on stage with somebody. I think that I am hoping that this will be an exercise in my ability to listen.
yeah.
And I believe that is really what this is about, and it is a challenge that I accepted because, first of all, I love improv. I'm mediocre at it at best. I could improv in our Brilliant Adventures thing, but we've been working on it forever, and you should be able to do that when you work on something forever. But I think that this will be an exercise in listening, which is a trouble area for me sometimes.
Wow.
Part of this
hard.
part of this
It's
grad
probably
school
one of the
thing is
hardest
figuring
things.
out what you're not great at, and
yeah.
it's something that I struggle with, and I need to do better. And so this is a challenge where I anticipate me doing a lot of listening.
Oh wow. Okay, right. Jake, same question.
I know exactly what happens.
Oh, see, I have no idea.
You are a lying
I
sack
took
of
your
shit.
advice, and I
Lying
know
sack
nothing
of
about
shit.
this play.
Well, and I can't say anything that. Look, do you want to know what happened? Here's what happened. There was a pamphlet. All right, I don't know. I'm outing myself, but I read a sentence and a half of what the play was about, and I went, "Oh, that's about the play." And I shut it, and I tried to forget it so hard. But I think I know one small detail that I'm like, I probably shouldn't know that going in.
I wouldn't know. I wouldn't ask about the details. I just wonder what you think is going to happen. Do you think you're
So
going to be
I
handed an
think
envelope
here's-
with a script? Do you think you're going to be handed an outline? Do you think that?
Now, because also we should let the audience know, or the people listening, that we've been rehearsing side by side, so we have actually heard.
Some of the rehearsal.
Some of the rehearsal. Now it's usually Joe muffled going.
And there's a
But
lot of banging, it
There's
seems.
banging, there's crying. People are like,
I mean-
"Let me go!"
You guys
please."
are really going to be surprised by the sword fight. You really shouldn't improvise a sword fight.
Raised voices and banging is semester 2 in the UNLV grad program. So
best kind of
I'm really
theater.
excited. I can't tell you how excited I am. So I can't wait. I can't wait. It's going to be so much fun.
What I still imagine happens, though,
Yeah.
and this is a guesswork at best,
Yeah.
is that somehow you ask that other character to do certain tasks or to speak to certain individuals or to explain certain things to people that are younger than them. And I don't know why I have that in my head.
Wow, what a fun idea.
I don't know if that's true or not, but
I'm not telling.
Yeah, that's something in my head where there's going to be a major ask, and it's going to feel uncomfortable, but there's not going to be a sense of any right and wrong, hopefully, in it. It's just presented honestly, but there's going to be some level of discomfort in it.
Cool. I'm going to let that hang in the air.
Yeah.
Sure.
Now, but I'm also going to mention we've recorded this in middle January. Tonight, actually, in our rehearsal, we've talked a lot about your wife, Jake. Your wife is actually doing the show
tonight,
in
yeah.
rehearsal tonight. I hope I have your word that you guys will not speak about it once she's finished.
I pinky promise, swear. Here, pinky promise live right here. Okay,
Oh, they
everyone
did it.
knows we did it. Pinky
They did it. I
promise.
saw it.
That's all.
That
that's
I will
all
not
ask.
ask, and I will shut down any conversation that reveals anything.
That's
whatsoever.
all I ask.
There's
And
nothing more binding than two grown men doing a pinky promise.
No,
I mean,
I guess
it's
we
as
could do the whole
binding as
knife
there
thing,
is.
but no, you're right. You're right. And that's going to bring us to the end of episode 3, season 3. I want to thank Jake and Ryan for hanging out and chatting about Alistair McDowell's brilliant adventures. We love talking about the work, you know, the writing, the capital T theater, and we hope that you do too. We think you do. Otherwise, what's the point of all these microphones and the buzz conversations, right? So here at Public Fit, those things really inspire us. You can help extend the conversation by not just subscribing, but also by throwing up a quick review or a one-click rating. Your feedback is essential in guaranteeing that we deliver the topics and interviews that interest you the most. If you prefer the old email, we can be reached at behindthebuzz@apublicfit.org. Join the conversation. There's so much to talk about. Behind the Buzz is a product of a Public Fit Theater company. It is directed by Ann-Marie Pereth and me, Joe Kucan, and is recorded, mixed, and edited by the ridiculously overworked Diane Walton.